Hey man, here we are.
Here we are.
My question for you is Freddie real? Freddie, remember Freddie with the green glove?
Of course.
He's a character in Twin Peaks, you
You're
know.
just going you're going straight into it. Yeah. Uh is he real? Well, first of all, I need to preface everything by saying that I'm only speaking for myself. I think I do this every time I talk to you, like privately
Yeah.
or whatever. I can only speak for myself. As far as I know, which is not very much, I take the show as it is, as it's presented, and I do think that the character of Freddie in the show is real, for sure.
Okay.
Now let me ask you, why do you ask that?
Well, there are a lot of things about him that are just super strange. And I also wonder to what extent Part 17 in general, which is, where he has his major role, is to what extent are these events actually happening, or to what degree are they existing in some sort of mental or some other type of space, because it's some weird stuff right there. Now, I know it's a show with some supernatural characters and, you know, odd events to say the least. But I don't know. I wonder if James would remember him, for example, like, a couple weeks later.
Well,
Uh,
that's the thing. I kind of go back and forth on that too, because I part of me feels like the return can be viewed in so many different ways. It's kind of hard to keep track of all the different ways,
yeah.
because people have a lot of great theories, and there's some like one day I'll be like, this is the greatest theory I've heard so far, and I'll wake up the next morning and being like, I'll tell myself, what the hell? What is this? Like, why did I think this was? Why did
Yep.
I think this was worth my time? But at the same point, I mean, I think that's the nature of the show.
I do. Yeah. And it sort of ebbs and flows. And I could definitely relate to that. Like, I wouldn't say I get embarrassed afterwards, but sometimes I'm like, what the hell was I thinking? You know?
No, I get it too, man. Like, I completely understand. Like yesterday, I woke up thinking that maybe the return is just like from the viewpoint of Laura Palmer having being saved. It's just the entire show is like, remember saying elsewhere that it was like a dream,
Hmm.
but it's her dream. And the final voice, with Sarah calling Laura's name, the dream's over. She wakes up because time has changed. And then today I woke up, I was like, you just got to take these things at face value. But I'm going to change my opinion by the end of this conversation, probably too.
Yeah. Say that in a different way, taking things at face value.
Well, it's like this story progresses in a way, like for a viewer, it goes from, I would say from point A to point B, but it is chopped up and time sort of fragmented, and stories are even fragmented a little bit. So viewing it as just like a regular viewer, first time watching, obviously there's like confusion like crazy, right?
Yeah.
And so you're trying to connect. I mean, because humans, our nature is to make connections to things. Like you're trying to connect why situations happened and what were the result of those situations, but it kind of gets flipped on its head where it's the result of a situation that you're waiting to find out what the cause of it was. Does that
Mm.
make sense?
It does. Yes.
It's hard to just like observe it without lending your own personal like viewpoint and even personal experiences in life like to it, and I think that's also what makes it great and fun.
Yeah. I mean, anybody who talks or comments on this show or has thoughts that they share publicly on this show is bringing their own life to it. I've almost never heard comments, at least extended comments from somebody where I don't say to myself, "Oh, that's their life experience," sort of
Hmm.
blending in, blending into that take. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. And
Which
I think
is
that's
interesting.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's like, I mean, great art does that, right? Like some
It
people
does.
look at a like an abstract painting and can find the meaning of their life in it, while others just are like, what the hell is this garbage? You know? My
100%.
3-year-old could have made that.
Yeah, and do you think it's the case that Cooper could not actually defeat Bob, but Freddie could? And
Say that one more time.
back to Freddie. The case that Cooper couldn't actually defeat Bob, but like they needed Freddie to do it because Cooper doesn't actually like, go toe to toe with him in part 17.
That is interesting. I don't know if I've ever really thought too much about that, but like thinking, and this is going to be straight off the top of the dome, so I'm probably going to change my mind by the end of the conversation. It does put into mind whether or not Cooper in part 17, like the reassembled or reignited Cooper, is actually alive. You know what I mean? Like,
Yes and no. Say more.
well, so I think it was that Lynch on Lynch quote where the evil Cooper, I think he said, was sort of the two sides of a person.
Mm.
And so if you think about, well, he was shot, and I don't think he was necessarily brought back to life, which is interesting because Bob actually left his body. Again, I'm strictly thinking off the top of the head right now.
Yeah, sure. Just riff with it.
I mean, Bob left his body. It's weird that Bob didn't leave his body necessarily with Ray in part 8. And in part 17, I guess that was just a culmination of the thing that was supposed to happen. Maybe because Cooper was actually there or on the way. I don't know. The plan, as I remember from the fireman, was for Freddie to get the glove.
Yeah.
And maybe it was part of the fireman's plan. Maybe Cooper couldn't do it because he wasn't Cooper. You know
Or,
what I'm saying?
yeah, or maybe even if he was Cooper, maybe he couldn't do it. I'm not.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe this is just somebody who's too formidable an opponent for anybody who doesn't have a supernatural counter. Speaking of superhero stories, we get our little mini
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
There's a lot of supernatural seeming stuff in this. I have another question. When the guy with the Truck U t-shirt is trying to harass Sarah Palmer and she bites his neck out, no
Hmm.
blood, no blood at all on her chin, on the clothes, similar to like this Sam and Tracy encounter with an experiment, no blood. Uh, all this stuff is just weird. I don't have any answers, but I'd like your thoughts on that. Anything
Well,
go?
that's an example. That's an example of sort of a palatable, horrifying like moment. You know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
that guy gets his comeuppance, and well deserved, of course. But I'm a little lost. What do you mean there was no blood on Sam and Tracy?
Oh, I think when what's her name? Agent Preston, when
Yeah.
she says they comb this whole scene for like evidence, there's no prints, there's no fibers, there's no blood splatter. There's just like, what you see on their like destroyed heads, I think. So there's no blood splattered all over the room. And
Right.
with Sarah Palmer, like her mouth.
Right.
So that I don't know,
I,
it's weird stuff.
there's a lot of assumptions that go with this, so bear with me. If we're to assume that Sarah Palmer and the experiment are kind of like the same creature, I don't know if they're the same entity. I don't know. Like, I stay out of that Judy mother conversation.
Yeah.
But if they're the same sort of, you remember when she takes her face off,
Mm-hmm.
there's like a little, it's almost like a stinger or something that shows up like behind the face. And I think it's part of that. But I mean, she does take a bite out of his face and there's no blood. Or maybe she just opened her mouth wide enough that there wasn't any blood. These are supernatural. I wouldn't even say supernatural, but maybe more other dimensional things that like don't obey the laws of physics.
Yeah, I do.
That's the best I can come up with for that.
Yeah, maybe that's where some of that sort of dreaminess quality comes in because part of dreaminess might be just that, like a Rene Magritte type physics don't
Yeah.
lie here.
I mean, there's like stories. Have you heard like of thin places where like the veil is thinning between the, living and the dead?
Yeah.
Like I think they have one in Ireland or Scotland or something, like I think at the end of summer.
Oh, real places.
There,
Oh, okay.
yeah, I mean, they're, supposedly,
Yes. Yeah.
I don't know if they're real or not, but
Hmm.
I think it follows sort of that concept. And if you look at it from that concept, Glastonbury Grove, for instance, in the last episode of season 2, that's one of those thin places. And we know everybody but Cooper, Wyndham, and Annie are everybody else there's dead, or for lack of a better term, another dimensional being.
Yeah.
I think it's sort of the same concept, and I think even in season 3, like that thin veil is getting even thinner, and things are leaking in and out, from from the worlds, and I think that's what you're seeing
Hmm.
mostly. Gonna change my mind by 7 o'clock.
Yeah. It's plausible.
Yeah.
That's my answer to almost everything I hear that I don't ignore. Some things I hear I just totally ignore, but everything else, yeah, that's plausible.
There's a writer that I like, Catherine Davis. Have you heard of her?
No.
She's just a great writer, and like she wrote this book Duplex. She also has one called The Thin Place, and I had just got done reading The Thin Place,
Hmm.
and all of this like weird synchronistic stuff started happening where I was like starting to see parts of The Return and like just Twin Peaks in general and like each other's work. It was really interesting, random but interesting.
Yeah, and also, I'm sure quite pleasurable because I'm often looking for things like that. Not looking for connections, but looking for other texts that sort of have a somewhat of a familiar, I mean, similar vibe, or act on me in a similar way.
In this case, I didn't know. I
Yeah,
just
that's even
randomly,
better.
yeah, I just checked it. Like it seemed like a cool story, Duplex, and I read it and I wasn't disappointed and highly suggest your work.
That's pretty cool. I have two questions that actually I had written down that I wasn't intending to ask, but I want to, and then just pick either one or both. So I'm gonna read, okay? Um,
Okay.
so the first one is, what are some films you would recommend to detectives or fans of Twin Peaks? So films you might recommend. And then my second question is, what are some texts, film, TV, or literature that are A, as challenging to interpret or analyze, and B, as compelling as Twin Peaks? Thank you for any suggestions. Those are tough questions, but does anything jump to mind?
A ton of stuff jumps to mind. I always feel like these lists that people do on Reddit and things like that for Twin Peaks adjacent stuff
Oh, I
is
see.
probably better than what I'd suggest because whatever I suggest is just going to come from my personal taste. Off the top of the head, well, the third policeman, we've talked about that
Yeah.
before, and I think that definitely has that sort of vibe, and it's very challenging. The Erasers by Elaine Robillard, I think it's his first book. It's sort of a detective story with no answer, and it's very circular, like a lot of Lynch's stuff. Um, Shoot. I mean, there's a
Yeah.
lot. I mean, that Nabokov, Barry Gifford, obviously, Catherine Dunn. I don't know if you've read Geek Love. That definitely has some Lynchian vibes to it. I can't remember. I think I read it on that Lynch net years ago that he had optioned that story, but who knows about that stuff?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, is that good?
Yeah, yeah. I would say
Yeah.
the Wind Up Bird Chronicles probably.
Oh, sure.
That's probably on a
Yeah.
lot of those lists. I've never seen any of those lists. I'm not on the Reddit too often, but I know what you're talking about. Um, The Third Policeman by Flann O'Brien is probably the book I most want to reread out of all
Oh,
the books
yeah.
that I've read. So I
Absolutely.
haven't gotten around to it yet, but that one I definitely want to come back to.
That's one of those books that like it's going to be different every time you read it. Like it's going to affect you in a different way and you're going to notice stuff that you didn't notice before. I've read it so many times. I
Hmm.
love it.
I have another question that I did write down a couple questions, by the way. So,
Okay.
I like to have a partial plan. And one of the questions, since you mentioned him, was, and obviously you do have thoughts, but my question is, do you have any thoughts about Barry Gifford, who doesn't, at least in my encounters with sort of like the Lynch world, he doesn't get mentioned so much nowadays. Maybe he did for a while, but I rarely come across his name. And do you just have any like general thoughts at all?
Personally, I feel that Barry Gifford, yeah, is horribly underrated. She's written so much and gets kind of overlooked, or it has been overlooked for so long. And what he did with Lynch is like top tier stuff. I also like, I kind of feel, although Blue Velvet has a noir vibe to it, I feel like Lynch started becoming more engrossed in noir
Hmm.
after Barry Gifford. Have you ever read The Devil Thumbs a Ride?
No.
It's this book that Gifford has. It's like sort of an encyclopedia of noir, but
Oh, yeah.
it's also like little reviews of the movies, and they're like in alphabetical order. It's really good. I mean, it's not just noir. It's, you know, like Rebel Without a Cause is in there, and
Mhm.
like things like that. But uh, I think that was written like in '88 or something. And yeah, Wild at Heart came out in '90, and then you really start getting that noir feel from the Lynch films after that. And
Interesting.
yeah, even with Twin Peaks, there's so many noir references, like in the characters and moments and lighting and all this stuff. So I think his impact on Lynch and on Lynch's filmmaking, it's forgotten and it should be remembered, and he should be remembered for sure.
Yeah, and
And I
I'm
think
go ahead.
the scripts for Hotel Room are going to be re-released in a book in August, and it has one episode in it that wasn't filmed, or maybe
Mhm.
it was filmed and it was never released. And it was released, at some point like in the '90s, but it was out of print. But they're re-releasing it. I'm super stoked because I haven't read that unfilmed one.
Yeah, that would be awesome to see.
Yeah.
Yeah, I loved the hotel room with him and her.
Crispin Glover and Alicia
Yes, thank
Williams.
you very much.
Yeah, yeah. That one's terrific.
I
Yeah, I
teed
love
that
that
up.
one.
Yeah, that one's incredible.
Yeah.
So if you had to in like 15 seconds or so characterize your thoughts on Barry Gifford, what would that be?
In 15 seconds, master storyteller. That's it. That's all I can
Awesome.
say. Yeah.
That's beautiful. I'm gonna shift our attention to Dale Cooper. He's a character from Twin Peaks, and he's told to listen to the sounds in the first episode of season 3. And my question is, does he listen to the sounds? Which ones, when, etc., etc. And then I want to talk about your own listening to the sounds, but does Cooper listen to the sounds as far as you've observed?
It's hard to tell. He gives zero indication that he's listening to anything. I don't know. For instance, let's take part 17 when he goes into the basement of the Great Northern and you hear, the high pitched
Yeah.
humming drone sound. I don't know if anybody down there can even hear that, or if it's just us that hears it. I don't know. I don't have an answer for that one. It gives no indication of his attention towards listening. But then again, how do you give attention to that? Tilt your head to the side and up into the air
Yeah.
with your ear aimed somewhere? I don't know. And then what was the other part?
Well, before I get to the other part, is the fireman telling him? It seems like he's telling Cooper to listen to the sounds, right? What
Absolutely.
what I mean, is that just their way of telling us to listen to the sounds, or like what is the function of that, do you think? That directive?
It's interesting because we get a close up on the phonograph. I hesitate to speculate on what the sound really is, but I'm assuming it's a locked groove.
Like in a record?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's always been like, when you get to the Matrix and they carve a little like dent into the record so it doesn't completely lift the arm up and then
Mm.
put it back on the little stand there. So it just stays there. I think that Beatles did it with that Revolution number 9.
Hmm.
I could be way wrong. I'm not a Beatles head, so I don't know. But like if you stop it at if you put the groove or the thing in the record where you want the locked groove, it could be me saying, "Hey Anthony," and it'd just be locked, "Hey Anthony, hey Anthony, hey Anthony, hey," you know what I mean? And so on, which like indicates what's going on in the Palmer house when she's watching television.
Hmm.
So I mean, that's, I guess, again, it's going to change, but it's something.
Re- uh, Once again, reasonable. Well,
And
I
maybe
I am
maybe the whole focus is that he's not paying attention to the sounds, and so he doesn't realize what's going on, and
yeah,
that's his folly.
that's interesting because the main directive, or it seems like it's the main directive above all else, is listen to the sounds.
Yeah, it's the very first.
How about how about in your own listening? Are the sounds that you have heard, are they ever clues, or are they just kind of interesting, or are they just artsy? Because
I don't.
you've heard a lot of sounds, and you've also pulled out a lot of sounds that the casual listener is not going to hear. So I don't know, whatever you want to say about your own listening.
Yeah, I mean, we have the vaulted episode where I actually went through the sounds and described what was happening. And since then, I've found a lot more, but it's like sort of a Gordian knot trying to untie like everything and what it really is. And then after that, what's that supposed to mean?
Yeah.
I don't know if it has a necessary, like specific meaning to whatever we're seeing, right? I think sometimes when those sounds occur, they heighten the mood of the otherworldly. Like for instance, in Fire Walk with Me, those backward sounds are always an indication of, people, or well, not people, but the
Some sort of
other
presence.
yeah, the other dimension is crossing over, you know what
Mhm.
I mean?
Yeah.
Or Bob is Leland is Bob, Bob is Leland, like with things like that happen, or
Mm.
the grandmother and the grandson. I think anything backward is to indicate that. And I did like find with Fire Walk with Me, a lot of those backward tracks are Penderecki's symphonies kind of laid down on top of each other. Volumes turned up in one area of a track. Meanwhile, Symphony number 1 is playing, and then you have the Polish Requiem vocals over it, and it's
Mm.
slowed down and reversed. So there's a lot of that thing going on there. Whether or not it's important, I don't know.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's hard to try to put voice to another person's work and their intent. That's more for critics, and I'm not a big fan of critics.
I see. But it's certainly important to establishing the feeling and the mood and the hypnotic qualities of the show. I
Oh,
think,
absolutely.
yeah, I think even that opening line, "Listen to the sounds," is it's possibly some sort of like hypnotic like invitation, because it does make you lean in, literally, like physically,
Sure.
and
Absolutely.
it keeps your ears and eyes perked up the whole time.
Have you found anything interesting, like from watching specifically The Return, where like the sound had fascinated you, where you thought it was more than just a sound?
Uh, Nothing is coming to mind, but I did find it interesting that Cooper's transparent face in part 17, the big fit that we live inside a dream face. Um,
Sure, yeah.
I think that fades from the screen at the exact moment that the ringing sound in the basement begins. I could be wrong, but there's some connection between the two, and I just that just might be a style thing, but I have to imagine there's more going on there than that.
You
Uh,
know, that reminds me, I know one sound that I think was super specific to the moment in The Return. It's not really, groundbreaking, but in part 3, when Cooper goes to that number three outlet, the
Mhm.
conduit, you know,
Yeah.
the first time he shocks himself, he kind of like, you know, jumps back, and then he goes again the second time, and it shocks him, and then all of a sudden, you know, his eyes are open really wide. All of
Yes.
a sudden there's a sound of like a power shutting down. So I think that's when he starts becoming Dougie, and like that second shock is like, uh-oh, this man's brain dead. You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
That completely makes sense. And you know, Dougie Cooper, whoever you want to, he's been through the ringer, man.
Or maybe it just maybe it's an indication that his senses are dulled enough to go through a damn outlet.
I'm just thinking of him crawling with a fork toward an
Oh,
outlet
in part.
later on.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and like the desire to want to go back in there somehow, so to speak. It's just
Boy,
interesting.
I loved that the first time I saw it. When Sunset Boulevard was
Yeah, I
on
was gonna
TV,
ask you, did you pick up on that reference right away? Like,
immediately I was
yeah,
like,
yeah.
no way, I can't believe he's doing
You must
this.
have been losing your mind at that moment.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Super cool because yeah, I mean I know you pretty well and I know that that era of film is one of your favorites and you know a lot of those movies. I've watched a lot of them over the past couple of years, but when I first encountered that scene, I had seen Sunset Boulevard, but it didn't connect at all for me. So,
Really?
yeah, so that must have been pretty exciting for you.
Have you seen it recently and your feelings have changed, or is it still kind of?
No, 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 no. I didn't mean it. That moment in the show
Oh, I
when
see.
he sees it on TV, like it wasn't all connecting in my head that that was Sunset Boulevard and that specific scene from the film. Yeah, no, that movie's amazing.
Have you ever seen The Loved One?
No,
Tony
I've been watching
Richardson?
a lot of 1950 movies because the Criterion Channel, which I
Oh
got a
yeah.
subscription to, they have Peak Noir. That's one of their features right now, and
Yeah, that's good
they have
shit.
about 15 movies from 1950, and then
Absolutely,
uh,
yeah.
Eddie Muller and um, I forget her last name, Imogene, somebody introduced
Oh
it.
yeah, yeah.
Good stuff, man.
Absolutely, yeah.
Good stuff. Cooper,
You
go ahead, ask me before I ask you about Cooper.
No, no, go ahead.
Um, is where has he been for the last 20 to 25 years? In a literal red room, do you think? Rubber room? Something else? Somewhere else? What is your feeling today or in general?
Today, let's have that in bold typeface. Today.
Exactly.
Today, I feel like I see, and we've had this conversation before, where I feel like the Red Room is sort of like Cooper's interior thought space, but it's also, I mean, that's a contradiction because I also feel like it's a Land of the Dead type thing, a
Mm,
Bardo, you know, that whole thing. But I do think it also acts as an interior space for him. I think the way he's connected with Laura Palmer is that they share that same space in a weird way because she's able to dream it and be in it and all that. And part of me feels like Mr. C and Cooper aren't two separate people. They are on the screen. Well, let me say this. I come from my like thought process and storytelling and like the way I understand stories. A lot of it comes from Ingmar Bergman. And, you know, in Ingmar Bergman's stories, characters can represent emotions or personality types of a single person,
mm,
right? Like Persona, for instance, it's two women, but technically one person, one that doesn't talk, the other, you know, that does talk. And it's these two like battling psyches and one woman like trying to figure herself out, you know, that kind of thing.
yeah.
From my personal point of view, that's how I view the Red Room. That's how I view a doppelganger. That's how I view like Cooper. So I also kind of feel that Cooper is inside of Mr. C, right? And so he's able to leave that space. I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. you got me. You
We're
got me
gonna
in a
put
corner now.
we're We're gonna put that one in bold too.
Yeah, we might have to cut that one out.
No, no. Let's run with that. So, are they inside each other? Like, is Mr. C inside Cooper and vice versa? Or
Part of me feels that way. Part of me feels like there's no difference between the two, right?
interesting.
I do like other than clearly attitude and physical appearance, right? But they're still considered the same person. And yeah, like we have to suspend belief because the story like dictates that we need to be aware of tulpas and things like that. But at the same time, where does someone like Mr. C come from? Because he's not a tulpa, right? He wasn't created by Cooper. So he has to come from a different dimension or a different, like a world like ours, but like the complete opposite. You know what I'm saying?
Let's go back to the finale of season 2. People say Cooper like fails a test of some sort in the Red Room. Do you think that's the case? Is that is the first appearance of Mr. C, correct?
There's parts of Twin Peaks that I resonate more with. The back half of season 2, where it starts talking about the black and white lodges,
Yeah.
imperfect courage, all that stuff. I like that gets into a realm of that I can't wrap my head around for what Twin Peaks is.
Okay.
I'm not saying it's wrong. I love that people have opinions about it. For me, I can't comment on it because it's not something I consider when I consider talking about Twin Peaks.
I see. Um, Fair enough. Is there
I'm sorry.
no, that's okay. I'm just because you were speculating where my Mr. C have like originated from. Do you think there's one Red Room, or are there like are these many
Mm,
are there many like is one of these many is one of these many like chevron floored rooms, is one of them like the actual Red Room?
I think it's. I think there's. I
That's
think
kind of a
it's.
stupid question, but
No. It's gets into non-Euclidean spaces. I think it's one space that doesn't follow any normal forms of physics that we're familiar with. It's beyond our comprehension. That's why I always think it's funny when people complain about the effects in the Red Room, because if this is supposed to be an otherworldly place,
mm,
it's not going to follow the same sort of look and feel of what we think is cool.
I always have a hard time following those critiques because I don't have much technical know-how in filmmaking or like, editing and whatnot. So
Right.
when people criticize like the effects in The Return, I'm like, I literally never noticed any of that. Like I don't know, because I don't know how to do any of that stuff. So
Right. I think to a lot of younger people, they're used to a certain way things look. They have like sort of like a Pixar CGI sort of
mm,
like view of how a movie should look, and it's hard for them to wrap their head around a TV show that uses this weird, what seems like outdated technology,
oh,
um,
okay.
to get something across, but it's not supposed to be normal. You know, it's supposed to feel different and awkward and weird.
The last time we spoke, you showed me two books that that happened to be lying on your floor or something, and I paused so that we could look
Uh-oh.
at those. And one of them was a Ramayana, and one of them was the Upanishads. And I read the Ramayana, and I've only read the intro to the Upanishads. Super fun to read, very weird, very weird. At least as far as the version of reality that somebody living in 21st century America would imagine. I know these are from a different time, these texts, but like there's a monkey that that could swell to like 300 feet tall. Um,
Hanuman, baby.
oh, he's the man.
He's
Uh,
a good friend.
but but and in the Upanishads, there's some really wild stuff as far as how reality is. Maybe reality is not even the best word. How the world is explained, or yeah,
Right.
one of the things it claims to do, I think, is offer an explanation of reality. And is Twin Peaks, especially The Return, is it like a religious show in any way? Like, is it possibly, is it taking some of these unusual concepts from philosophy or religion or something and sort of just maybe like literalizing them? Like if these things were to show up on a TV screen nowadays, this is how these sort of unusual concepts would look.
I don't first of all, I don't think it's a religious show. Twin Peaks is its own thing. I think it's a spiritual show for sure, but I mean, at the same time, I'm sure you've had experiences in your life that you haven't been able to explain or,
Yeah.
you know, that are like moving and like you try to explain it to somebody, it's like trying to explain a dream where nobody really cares what your dream is because like you cannot explain it in a way that'll make it as interesting as it felt in the dream.
Yeah,
You
I
know
mean
what I mean?
that's almost the quickest shortcut to boring somebody is trying to explain your dream. Do you think you'll ever have an AI friend in your lifetime?
No, I don't have any friends now. I'm not expecting to get any robots to I can't convince them to be my friend.
Well, that's part of the question. Now, I know you have some sort of physicist colleague or friend. Have any friends enhanced your perspective or experience with Twin Peaks or like David Lynch's stuff?
The people that have changed my perspective are like podcasts that I've listened to, like yours, for instance, hearing people on there and you yourself. Actually, Colin's podcast,
Hmm.
that Cream Corn in the Universe, a lot of the conversations he has sort of give me a different perspective on things that I really appreciate. But yeah, I don't know. I feel sort of at some point we all arrive like to the same point and sort of start concocting ideas of our own and don't really share it with one another that much because we don't want to be wrong.
Interesting. Say a little more
Yeah.
about
Well,
that.
I think
I don't necessarily disagree, or it's not. That's I just want to hear you talk about that.
really when anybody has a theory about anything, not just like Twin Peaks or
Yeah.
but anything, you get to a certain point where you feel confident in your
Mm,
perspective of things, and then when you share it publicly, you leave it. It belongs to everybody else now, and they can shoot your idea down or agree with you, and it gets sort of taxing at that point because it's not yours. It's not as special. It doesn't mean as much to you. You know what I mean? After that point, and
yeah.
so like even on a one-on-one conversation, it gets sort of complicated. It's complicated to explain, but I think you understand what I'm trying to say.
I do. It's a very interesting concept too. Um, yeah, even just chatting like this, and then if we happen to decide to publish this somewhere, then just then that's like a whole nother layer. But
Oh yeah, and there'll
even
be a lot of cringe moments for me where
yeah,
I'm going to be
sure,
like, "Why did I say that?" You know?
100%. Yeah. Now I've sort of set up this thing for myself where I'm kind of like the person who has a lot of questions and is always saying that I don't understand anything.
You do.
Which is pretty accurate, but
No.
that it's possible that's just like some sort of protective covering, to handle the stuff that you just explained.
I
Because
think also it's you want to take in what you don't know. I'm sure, like for me, there's definitely pockets. Like in this case, I'm not saying I feel forced to answer, but we're having a dialogue where I have to come up with something. You know
yeah,
what I mean? And so, like when you're the one asking the questions, it's a little easier.
hmm,
I understand that for sure. But there's pockets that I don't know. There's pockets that I won't ever know. And then I'll have a feeling about it one way and then it'll change like the entire discussion we've been having. And I think that's good. Your perspective, I mean, is good because you're not tied down to anything specific, but you're open to anything.
yeah. So you know what they say about being open. You're so open-minded, your brains fell out. So I know that feeling all too well. But yeah, I know what you're saying, and I appreciate that. Sometimes I do feel like I'm picking up my brains from the floor. Do you have any, are there any, this is going to be a broad question. Are there any like favorite things or elements or even mysteries in Twin Peaks or David Lynch's work that just hit you?
There's a lot.
Yeah, like a couple favorites.
I'm not expecting anything, and I'm always surprised by everything. Here's something I enjoyed. I wasn't expecting the Aki Kaurismäki style in the return of just like breathing in a scene. You know what I mean? Like I loved that. I
Mm,
know a lot of people didn't like it. I loved the space in a scene, like the sweeping scene. Great. I know that's an easy one to point out.
sure, yeah.
But how about the scene between Gordon, Diane, and Tammy when they're outside smoking and Gordon takes a smoke for the first time?
Yeah.
First time that space in that scene, it was, like I love those kind of scenes. I think they're great.
Any favorite mysteries, large or small, in Twin Peaks? We'll limit it to that.
I'm curious where Cooper's double came from. Hello?
I was giving it space.
Beautiful.
And you know what? To give space like that really does require some conscious restraint.
I know it's great because it leaves an awkward moment
It
for
does, yeah.
anything can happen. The whole dynamic has changed, and it's a surprise at every moment. Mysteries upon mysteries.
It really is true. And well, if you're having a discussion, and especially if the record button is hit, there's a compulsion to talk, of all things.
Sure.
Who is the we in We Live Inside a Dream?
All right, getting back to it. I think, again, my perspective, the we could mean two things. The we could be everybody. I mean, reading the Upanishads, you're understanding the concepts of reality and all of that, like what is reality. And it could also be these entities that are, littered throughout the show that have meaning
Interesting.
in some form or another.
I
What
don't,
do you think it
I
means?
don't think I don't think I've ever actually thought of that second thing you said, believe it or not.
Really?
Yeah. No, I don't think I ever thought of them as the we. But I have thought of those entities as expressions of different things, both internal, external, sometimes concepts brought to life, or to quote Lynch, abstractions in human form. And then there's the dream word, who's the dreamer? We live inside a dream. That word shows up a lot. In the return, let's just stick with that. What do you think the literal definition of that word dream or dreamer or dreaming? Like, what do you think that word means? Is that just
Well, in the
that just about like subjectivity, or so to speak, or is that like, I don't know, I'll let you talk.
Well, it could mean reality. I'm willing to bargain that the intent was reality or what we perceive as reality. I'm trying to look at it from all different angles.
Hmm.
In that case, with Monica Bellucci saying it, this was in Gordon's dream. So we live inside a dream. It's his dream at that moment, let's say. And these are entities who are like maybe only available in dreams
Hmm.
or on the verge of death. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
Can I ask you about something you do know?
Sure, why not?
What happens in the ending of The Return? You could take the scene. You could take all of part 18. You could take 17 and 18 if you want. But I was thinking of that scene that I talked for hours and hours about a couple weeks ago, or a couple months ago. Take it however you wish. What are today's thoughts about the ending of this show? And it is the ending of the show, as far as I could tell. I mean, it's probably not going to continue.
Let me posit this to you. What do you think of Carrie Page as a tulpa made by Laura Palmer?
Okay. My first thought is that this is, maybe tulpa wouldn't be the word I would use, but
Double?
uh,
Triple?
yeah, really. Pressure valve, pressure valve receptacle or something. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know, like it's a way to survive.
Well, I'm starting to doubt, like lately I've been starting to doubt that that is Laura because I mean, it's Carrie Page.
Yeah.
Uh, but also, I was thinking all throughout the return there was all these, traps set for Cooper or for Mr. C about getting to that, the coordinates that he needed to get to.
Hmm.
And then if you were to condense that down and then flip it to Cooper in part 18, then like what if Carrie Page was a trap to stop Cooper?
Yes. Yeah.
So that's where I'm at.
Yeah. On the surface, I have no like counterpoint coming to mind, you know. Not
Mhm.
not that we're looking to debate here, but I have no like obvious, oh, that's interesting, but it can't be because blah, blah. None of that is jumping to mind right now, but it might.
Like this is just what I'm again thinking of today.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I mean, obviously there's an issue with Sarah because she responds to Sarah in a sort of negative way.
Hmm.
Even the Mary Reber's part, I wonder if that was sort of like a plant to prevent, Cooper from moving forward with
So
his plan.
this might not be easy to answer, or maybe it'll be super easy. But my question is, what is the stickiest idea about Twin Peaks that you've ever heard? It could be a small observation. It could be a very big theory. Maybe you were glad to have heard it. Maybe you're really not glad that you've heard it.
Well, initially, what got me interested in the sound for the return, apart from listen to the sounds, initially it was the Showtime trailers that
Mm.
had the theme song at half speed. But then I think it was around part 8, somebody had uh sped up, that Moonlight Sonata, and that stuck with me mostly because I realized it was like a culmination of realizing, oh, you know what? There's probably a lot more to the sound than I realized.
Mm.
I can't remember who it was that found that, but that was something that stuck with me. And then I started going like really far back. Um, and I was speaking with Ross Duddle. He at one point he was on the DUGFA forum,
Mm.
and he had found so much from the first and second season. A lot of the sound design from that was actually Badalamenti tracks from, oh god, what was that, Norman Mailer? Tough Guys Don't Dance, and there was another one. There was a Paul Schrader movie, has pleasure in the title.
Mm.
I can't think of what it is, but it was actually Badalamenti scores from those two movies that were slowed down.
Wow.
Um, yeah, he gave me a whole list, really, really nice, and yeah, that got me on my way, and I started untangling Fire Walk with Me's backward sound, which oh god, that's been difficult, but I've found the majority of those backward tracks, like I said, were Penderecki symphonies.
And then in the return, there's a lot of music from the original
Oh
series,
yeah,
but just redone, messed up,
yeah,
manipulated.
manipulated, yeah,
More,
big time.
yeah, more than most people would realize. And I know you and I have talked about this in the past, but do you think there's anything like maybe thematic about the fact that so much original music is in the return, and also that people don't really know that it's in there because it's in there in such a new way?
Do I think there's significance to that?
Yeah,
Is it?
yeah. Do you think that's like a
Oh,
symbolize something or is significant in some way?
sure. I think things have changed from that original show. That although we're watching Twin Peaks, it's changed, and like things are a little bit more frightening and a little bit more darker. And so I think because those scores are manipulated and mutated, even like that reflects sort of the mood of what's going on. I think that's a good indication of that.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I think for as much time and interest as I've devoted to the show, there's there's probably some sort of like a emotional element that I haven't gotten really strong with in my connection, because I always see the show as like it kind of begs like a lot of speculating.
Yeah.
Part of the fun is like trying to come up with stuff, or let your imagination run around and play.
Hmm.
But I do think there's a point where your imagination or your thinking process or like your analysis process is gets intense enough where it's, it becomes very real, and it becomes like like a big investment, not only of your thoughts and emotions, but your time. And, imagine investing all this time into your perspective on this work of art. It becomes a little more sensitive, I think, maybe, or it becomes a little more like delicate of a thing to share out and to
Yeah.
and for me, at least up to this point, it's kind of more just like playing around in a way, which I don't know, trying to, I think, true to the show because it asks for a lot of playing around. But like my assumption is that everything I say is going to be has like major holes in it, and that's what's fun for.
That's where I come from too. Like, yeah, like in the end, it's a television show, but in
Yeah,
a weird way, it's a little more because it's a television show that you bring whatever baggage you have towards it. Well, maybe baggage isn't a good term, but you bring yourself and your worldview towards things like with a show. So your opinion, it starts to become more like with any art, it reflects you.
yeah,
It just reflects you. And so if there's any critique with it, it starts becoming a little personal. At the same time, it's fictional, people. You know what I mean?
um,
But like I said at the very beginning of this thing, I'm first and foremost a David Lynch fan and a Twin Peaks fan second.
yeah, and
That's what I bring
I was
to it.
actually intending more of the conversation tonight to go in that direction, but it did very much get Twin Peaks centric, which is okay with me. But the scene with the cherry pie in the box from that show Twin Peaks. Uh,
Starring.
did somebody plant the cherry pie into Bradley's dream?
Well, that's the thing. But that also goes into omnipotent forces planting things to make things happen and to prevent things, which is weird. That's a big thing. It exists in the first two seasons. It definitely exists in Fire Walk with Me, but I feel like it's more prominent in The Return, where
Hmm.
there's omnipotent forces planning and trapping and yeah.
Why?
Well, Anthony, I didn't write it, so I'm not entirely sure, but I think because I'm going to try to answer this seriously.
Yeah.
I think because there's a dark force that plans something else to happen. Ergo, you have the doppelganger Cooper, right? So I think to combat that, the story calls for an even stronger force of good
Hmm.
to interject itself in to making things right.
I had a Chet Desmond question, but I'll save that.
You don't want to try it?
We're not,
Might be a better way to end it than
what
that
is
sad.
maybe we'll imitate him and end it that way. Maybe it's time to bend down and pick up the ring.
Okay.
No, do you have any thoughts on his presence in general, including like the end of his presence and or that end of his presence on screen at least?
Well, I love the character. I'm not sure. I mean, I think in the script, I'm gonna get this wrong, but I feel like the deputy that's at the Deer Meadow place. He does something. I think he like hits him over the head or something in the script after he tries reaching for the ring or something. I can't. It's something like that.
Hmm.
Since that's not the case, it's been years since I've read that damn script, but since it's not that's not how it ends, I'm not sure. He goes missing, so I assume he kind of suffers the same fate as Jeffries, maybe, where he's in one of them machines, but I'm not sure.
That's interesting.
Ladies and gentlemen, something is coming along for you to see and hear, and it will be coming along on June 5.
Do you feel like and I think many of us agree that it's probably going to be a new song and maybe a video to go with it, possibly an
Hmm.
album to follow. Do you think there's any chance that you wouldn't like it? Or are you already like sort of predestined to like his stuff, almost whatever he does?
First and foremost, I'm a Lynch fan before I'm like a Twin Peaks fan, you know?
Hmm.
And so obviously I have a bias towards his music and his art and films and stuff. So I think naturally I'm gonna like it. As an artist, I trust him.
Got
You
it.
know what I mean?
Hmm.
So I think the only thing that would be a turn off is if started singing songs about characters in Twin Peaks or something like that. I would not like that.
Yeah. The ballad of Ballad of Billy the Kid or something.
Yeah. But I don't think I've ever met anybody that enjoys his music.
You mean as much as you, or just in general?
In general.
Why do you think
I don't think I think it's because it's weird. I'd sort of equate this to like the beginning of the 2000s, because music's changed so much. It seems like it hasn't, but like in the past 20 years, obviously there's like been major shifts and stuff. And I think where we are now is a result of American Idol and like that pitch perfect singing.
Yeah.
And it's become so oversaturated that like the general population won't like actually listen to anything that isn't like super pitch perfect, tempo perfect. Like they don't like mistakes. That may change. I don't know. But right now that seems to be the music du jour.
You know, one thing I never asked you about was Cooper in the Philadelphia office seeing himself on the security camera and then, you know, stepping out and he's still there, or what? Maybe I have that backwards. Do you have any general thoughts on what's happening there? Is that just like something cool?
Maybe time stopped for everybody else and not for Jeffries. I'm not sure.
That's one of those. That's a scene that I'd like to get like a little group together.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
That would be probably the one that's at the top of my list.
I'd join that group.
Yeah, cool. Certainly going to be asked. But yeah, thanks for making the time.
Yeah, of course.
It was fun.